Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dr. Deep State. The title of the show today Was the Illuminati Jewish? And we have with us Justin. The Catholic State is, as they say, in the house with us, and John Kane Carter is here as well. When Justin gets on, I'm sure he's going to want to talk about briefly his channel got back up, and we'll put a link to that and let you know about his channel back on the air. He's going to focus on the theology of some of these questions that we ask over here. But yeah, I'm excited about this. What we're actually doing today is reviewing a very interesting book, and we're using this question as a segue to analyze this book from a Catholic perspective. So the book is a very memory hold book. We're coming up here from our Memory Hole Friday segment today, and we're going to share some of our thoughts with all of you. And it's by Rabbi Antelman. I first read it 11 years ago, I believe. And I'll go through it, and we want to lay out what he's saying, and then we're going to do a bit of a critique. The spicy part, we will hop over on Locals and do that. So we invite anybody to go over there to part 2. We're going to kind of watch ourselves a little bit up here because it was a very provocative book, and it has been memory hold. We'll go through the claims of the book in a moment, and we'll probably only be able to hit the tip of the iceberg because he's got some very large claims that cover a great deal of history, but he does use the word Illuminati in the past and present for the question today. We're using it in the past sense, the Bavarian group that started in 1776 and was disbanded. And we'll define these terms, Illuminati. We'll try to even unpack the concept of, was it Jewish? What does that even mean? So I want to mention before we get going, the book has been published and officially accepted by Amazon. However, it takes a couple days to process to get the links in place. So I will make a special announcement in a day or 2 or 3 when they're available. It will be available in paperback, hardcover, digital, and audio. And I'm very excited about that. Last week, John Kane Carter was nice enough to read the book, and he gave a nice thumbs up there in our Locals community. But of course, as we're talking about Locals, I want to quickly say how we set up the show this week in our Locals community, because we had an amazing week in Locals, and the links will be in the description for our Locals community. We set it up this week with this concept of what I called rule through contradiction. One of our members got me going on just the power of 1984 and that concept. So many concepts that are coming, that have been evolving, big brothers watching the surveillance state, 2 + 2 = 5. And we called this the rule by contradiction, or we essentially called it a rule through Discordian rule. And of course, one of the great contradictions of our age here is war is peace, which was a great one. But yeah, these ideas start, well, in the ancient of days. They're refined in the early 20th century by Crowley. They're re-refined in the mid 20th century through Discordian ideas and mimetic magic. And part of that magic formula is the mimetics. It doesn't have to be these formal rituals, but it can be put into blurps and signs and subliminally cast out. And the Illuminati trilogy was part of the idea of making a joke out of the concept we're saying today. I'm sure people will gravitate toward the thumbnail that says Illuminati and the hoods. And of course, we've been trained to yuck it up with that term, or the conspiracy term. And so we're going to think about this as Rabbi Antelman dealt with the concept. But one of the great ways the world is being kind of moved about right now is through contradiction. American first, and we have Benny here defining Benny, who said that he would vote for Benjamin Netanyahu if he could, the mass murderer if he could. He's defining America first. Where are we at in the world? And we're talking especially about America and our community, but we realize we have people from all over the world in our community, and it's the empire of spectacle. So this is maybe just rattling the most noise in the room to kind of get you in this mindset. So our community broke it down psychologically, spiritually, and we had the most amazing connect the dots day when we read through these, and just amazing people, amazing Catholic insight. And I get so much, and I try to absorb from the community as much as we can as we go on this week. This week we thought about taking rule through contradiction all the way from 1984 into 2026. And we had some very great systematic layouts of what we're going to see in the world to come, more absurdity, more discordia. And we're going to bear in mind, as we're talking about the book today, the very notion, and this is what doesn't get discussed, this is what the saints of the apocalypse want us to know about our days and the rulers of the world, and what, as Catholics, how we need to think about this. And I'm going to ask some people to maybe spread the word, and I'll talk about reviews because it is critical of the influencer landscape today. I believe that the saints are. But yes, what did that very word right there, and we'll be unpacking this, they worship a God of the Zohar that is outside of contradictions. He isn't bound by St. Thomas's idea of non-contradiction. So the people running the world are not, and not only are they not bound by it, they use this idea that they stand outside of the laws of contradiction or laws of non-contradiction and rule the world through this. How do we see this? How do we make sense? How do we escape from this empire of spectacle, which is generated by contradictions? And we had amazing, and again, links are in the description section for that this week. But yes, we'll be unpacking this God of the Zohar, this Kabbalistic Talmudic God, is a God that rules through contradiction. And we have to understand that so we can identify it and get outside of it. Nothing can be more powerful to understand over the last 2 years, the people that looked the other way while this was happening. If you can't get that right, you're going to be locked into this to some extent. War is peace. Next week, just so you know, we'll keep it on. We're going to keep it on our Memory Hole Friday show, but the three of us are going to be going over Dave McCowan's book, Wagon the Moondoggy. It starts with accepting some of these large question marks about space and so forth. So we're going to specifically go through his book about the moon. That's controversial to some people, but we're going to ask people just to look at his observations that he made. The following week, the three of us are going to really go through 14 of Ron Unz's revisionist history, specifically about that event in World War II. Big numbers, begins with an H. We're going to look at 14 books on locals, and that's going to stay on locals. And what are the main points among the Ron Unz found the top 14 revisionists. We're going to find the main points and why is it important to us to get out of this fake simulacrum of events, because they do become tied together through a demonic ontology, we argue, and so do the saints of the apocalypse very clearly argue that. So we're going to go over that in 2 weeks down there, and we're looking forward to going over the main points of the best 14 revision books. I'm not talking about the big H event in the Ukraine or in Russia or in Cambodia or in Armenia. No, the one that we've been pounded with our whole lifetime. So we're going to look at that central narrative and how it's important to escape this rulership. And we see it right now, ruled through contradiction. America, well, let's make a policies for America first. And all of them have to be according to Benji's idea of make sure the other country comes first, and that's America first. Taking that contradiction and pounding it, 2 + 2 = 5, and having you at least not respond back in kind. And so we had Father Kramer came on this week and mentioned that this is how they put their sign up, that this is our space now. We used to have the Kwanzaa, you got a little bit of your thing, but now it's just this. There was no nativity. It was outlawed on the White House lawn. There were 3 of these events. We went through all the videos. The kitchen is 100% kosher right now. They're walking around like they own the place. We had Levine manhandling, glad handling the Trumpster, saying he's the first J, he's our boy. And it's time to kind of really, when we think about voting, it's vote for people that oppose this if you need to vote, because that ship is kind of largely went. We have to see that there's a shifting going on in this reality. And the question is, how are we going to respond to this shift? It's worldwide. This is how they put their flag in the ground. And it's a real contradiction to say that this is a Christian country. And if the people that call themselves Christian are down with this program, you might think about yoking up with such people or letting yourself be influenced by such people. And that's the center of what we're talking about today. What is the Christian God versus what is this God that's now rearing its face and saying, we're here, get used to it. And we don't have to tell you, every time you accept these contradictions of the peace president, you can go down the list, bomb them, bomb them, bomb them, bomb them, bomb them, gonna bomb Iran. And we know whose script he's reading from. And we know they bedfellows, they said, he is one of us. He's doing our work. So here we are. I'll shush up here, but I do want to finish by just doing a big view of what Rabbi Antelman is talking about here. First of all, the book to kill the opioid. Let me find the book here. To Eliminate the Opiate. It's a 2-volume set. Rabbi Antelman wrote the first volume in 1974, and it looks at the origins of the 18th century. This is the Illuminati, linking them to the destruction of the Second Temple and subsequent apostate cults. In other words, he's threading this all the way back to the people that destroyed the Second Temple are at work in 1974. Volume 2, 2002, he expands that and basically says, all of the problems of the world that people like us identify, and we call it the SOS, he's saying it's not. What is he calling it? And this is the guts of what we want to get into today. He's calling all of the problems in the world, we would call it the World Economic Forum, or the Council on Foreign Relations, or the Bilderberg Group. You get where I'm going with this. The roots of this, the conspiracy, the worldwide conspiracy for Rabbi Antelman are Gnostic revolutionaries. So we got another word to unpack there. What does he mean by Gnostic? Because we're going to have a different sense as Catholics about that. The people in the what he would call the cabal, he calls it the Illuminati. They came out of the Illuminati and the Bund in Germany. They're anti-nominal. Nominalism, which means law. They're against the law. They're beyond good and evil, in sort of that Nietzschean sense, right? They transgress the law, and they believe in nihilism, like life is without purpose. And his main point, I think I got this right, is that Judaism was infiltrated by people with a secular mindset. So he wants to make that distinction, and we'll get into it. He believes in Israel. He believes about dominating the world. He believes in Noahide laws, but he thinks everything's so. It's a crazy headspace to go into. What we're about to get into, and so here are a couple key terms that we're going to be talking about here. I'm not going to go into defining the Illuminati right now, but it's West. We'll do it in a moment. So I think you got the basic Wikipedia concept of what the Illuminati is. But a couple key terms here. Zevi, Sabbatai Zevi, sometimes called Sabbateanism. He kind of comes on the world stage in 1666, and he's part of this we'll work out the terms if he wants to call it an infiltration, because it was really an interior development. And then the next generation of that was Jakob Frank. If you want to go back on my own videos 8 years ago, I have a 3-part series called Why Free Porn. And I go into the Sabbatean Frankists as a force in the world. And a lot of people, I believe that Henry Makow was influenced by these ideas, the idea that this foreign force first infiltrated Judaism and then Judaism infiltrated the rest of the world. Is that paradigm accurate? I would argue, to get the guys started here, that the 2 questions, just to kind of get the ball rolling, 2 things. We typologically, when I say we, it's us 3, not really many other influencers are doing this. We, including the saints of the apocalypse, call it the SOS, because that's how the saints told us. All the memory hold material we've looked at, including the Jesuit material, calls it the SOS, so that we can typologically understand in relation to Catholic theology, eschatology, and ecclesiology, put it all together. So if we understand that, we understand the enmity, we can get back to reality and cut through the spectacle. That's why we do this. So, and number 2, the point I would make would be that we need to discuss what the 3 of us are always discussing here on Friday, which is, what is the JQ, the Jewish question, from a Catholic? It's been redefined. It just means you're talking about them, and it's not. It's understanding the enmity, understanding the agenda, and understanding Jewish eschatology. So as Christians, you can prepare yourself, not be deceived, and ultimately take their mark of the beast. So that's a long introduction. I apologize, guys, for having to set it up so broadly. Since Justin's going to talk about his channel in just a moment, John Carter, let me start out with you. So just generally, the big picture is he is just like anybody in conspiracy land laying this out. But when you look at it, this is what we always do on Memory Hole Friday. If this were a Catholic writer, the AI, the Wikipedia would say, conspiracy nut, don't look, Father Dennis Fahey's conspiracy. But him, they don't want anybody to repeat this. They don't want people in the synagogue to repeat. This is memory hold, because they have, and so AI goes, he's making some provocative claims, excellent sources throughout, like Gershom Scholem. But they just, because they don't want to attract attention to it. So they treat it quite seriously. And I have, in my own head as a Catholic, I have many mixed feelings about this, but I'll let you rip, John. I've talked enough.
I think that the book is an op. I think the main push is at the end, when he starts to really promote Noahide laws as a solution. And it kind of ties in with Candace Owens and her big push,
Wow.
the Sabbatean Frankist movement. And so he's pushing the whole evil as mainly the Frankists, or the SF, the Sabbatean Frankists. And they're the problem, not the Jews themselves, or frankly, not the Talmud, which is the codified oral law, which is the problem, which is those who say there are Jews that are not. So I think that by focusing on the 1600s till the present, he has diverted successfully Jews from the truth, and keeps them in a box, and it makes it look like they're the ones who created Reform Judaism. And then then Rabbi or Rebbe Sneerson is a savior. And the problem is that Jews have turned from God. They're no longer following the Talmud, which is madness. And because of that, God has unleashed the hell of the Sabbateans upon them, and ultimately the Holocaust. The Holocaust was punishment for their apathy. So when you see that and you see Candace, it's like, bingo, there you go. That's what she's been doing. That she just pointed a finger at, So I think that's
Well, I know Justin's got some ideas cooking. So I think John just got right to, that's the first time we talked about this. So I thought you guys had, that's pretty much my short take on it too. He's pro Talmud, pro Noahide laws. Now, I don't know. I just don't know about Candace one way or the other. So, but invariably, if you take one paradigm, you can get pulled into it without even knowing it, right? So, yeah. And that's the problem of people not talking about the SOS Catholic influencers. But the Saints of the Apocalypse will, in no uncertain terms, talk about things that nobody else wants to talk about. And again, that's why I'm going to ask you when I put it up there to, if you really feel blown away by the book, to write a review, because that's the only way you can kind of cut through the noise. And I made the book very accessible this time. It's not academic language. It's the saints speaking to our age, the best I could commune with them. Justin, did you like the book at all, or was it a pain to read it? Did you find it intriguing?
I don't know if I would say
with Westervelt, like he's almost blaming Weishaupt, the Jesuit. It's the Christian Gnostics that are the problem. That was your first thing you tripped over, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't say like would be a strong word. It's interesting. Just real quick, just like you said I could, I'm gonna promote like my YouTube channel's back. It's been over 2 weeks and there's no strikes or anything. Christ the King, or at the Catholic State, if you use the @ symbol at the Catholic State. So, or there'll probably be links in the description, or like you'll probably see me in the comments. But anyways, okay. So my thoughts on the book. Just basically what you and John said so far. So like basically this rabbi that wrote the book, he comes from this metaframe that the real Jews are the ones that are the Orthodox Jews, right? The ones, and he doesn't like the term Orthodox, but they're the ones that, from his point of view, at least he expressed, that always believe in the religion of Judaism, or in the Torah and the God's laws and commandments and stuff, which, I would strongly push back against theologically. But anyways, also he believes in the Talmud and the Noahide laws, the anti-Christian stuff. But anyways, his thing is basically during the age of enlightenment, or darkenment, as I would call it. Adam Weishaupt, who, in case people don't know, he does have Jewish ancestry. Adam Weishaupt did. He was born, they were Catholic, apparently, at least, but with Jewish ancestry. He grew up, he was studied in a Jesuit school, and later became a professor of he's like a professor of canon law, of all things. Right. But the Jesuits were suppressed around this time, because this was during the age of enlightenment. And like a lot of people, including Weishaupt, were reading all these Freemasonic books, all these books on classical liberalism, like Locke and all the other ones that were all Freemasons, right? That's where classical liberalism comes from. So you got Weishaupt. This guy is like, he's like the synthesis of all conspiracy theories, because he was born to a Jewish family who practiced Catholicism and Jesuit. He was a Jesuit. And then he basically, he bought he drank all the Kool-Aid, and he created the Illuminati, which was basically a synthesis of Judaism, Jesuitism, and Freemasonry, right? It's like the worst of all worlds it basically took. And then so the Antelman, the Rabbi Antelman, the guy that wrote this book, essentially says that this Illuminati is like they're the whole, and we know this is true. He is speaking truthfully here when he says the Illuminati, their thing is to destroy religion, like, because religion is like, that's the worst thing. They want to destroy religion and replace it with the secularism, right? And so what happens is like, that's what the Illuminati gets going. And like even Marxism, like Karl Marx, I think people know that he was like Weishaupt. He was racially Jewish, but his family converted to Lutheranism. And then like, again, Antelman will say, well, Marx, he obviously wasn't a real Jew. He was essentially paid off by the Freemasons to create this communism, to create like world communism, right? And then he goes on to make the same claim with others like Zabbatai Zevi, who essentially created this new form, like said he was the Messiah and created this new form of secular Judaism, which basically led into like this crypto Jewry in Islam, because that's where the Dhamma came from. That's where the the Young Turks came from, that created like that perpetuated the Armenian genocide. And then you have another branch from Zabbatai Zevi, which were the Frankists, Jacob Frank. And then like he created Frankism, which is very bizarre. You know, that's the ideology that to get to God, basically you have to sin as much as possible to get to God, which is, that's what they believe. But anyways, they infiltrated the Catholic Church, and this is like, nobody denies this. Not like they literally converted en masse to Catholicism in order to subvert the church in Poland, right? I mean, that was a big part of what Frank did towards the end of their movement. You know, and that's where like a lot of this weird Polish messianism and stuff like that comes from. But anyways, so Antelman's ideology is like all these revolutionary spirit, this revolutionary spirit, this anti-religious zeitgeist, all this secularism and all these ideologies, all the communism, all these isms and stuff, feminism, whatever ism that have come since modern times, is essentially comes from Jews that have rejected their Judaism, right? That's his essential thesis. It's right. Jews that have rejected their Judaism, and if they were real Jews, they wouldn't have done this. So that's
internal
the
subversion, he calls it. Yeah,
right. That is the essential thesis through the book. So like, you know, and we talk about all this stuff. Our thesis is pretty much, well, it was the rejection of Christ that caused this revolutionary spirit. Right, yeah. Right. So that's basically how it's different, and you know, in a nutshell. So yeah, I think, and obviously I agree with a lot of his things. Like he's talking about like these revolutionary movements and how these people that are doing them turned away from God clearly. But you know, where he's different than us, we would say, well, it's because the rejection of Christ, Jesus Christ, where he would say it's the rejection of the Orthodox Judaism.
Yeah, it's almost hard to unpack this. He actually does use a lot of good sources, especially in volume 2, but I thought volume 1 was very problematic, and that he opens it up in the Enlightenment context, almost in an ahistorical, just kind of loosely calling these Gnostic subversives. So it's ahistorical, and he's working on this concept. The important thing, when he's always saying God, God's divine providence. What do you mean by God? And he's a Talmudic, Kabbalistic follower of the Zohar. So what that means is that God has no essence. He's so transcendent. So this is, you can't get out of Gnostic thinking when you think this way, because he's so transcendent. You end up divinizing yourself when you have a God that's so transcendent. The contents of the world divinize themselves when God becomes absent. That's famous saying from Eric Vogelin. But so what is God? It's not the Christian God. So when he's saying this, and if you ask your average Jewish person, they could be Orthodox, they could be atheists, they could be young, they could be old. When you ask them, what is God? You're going to get a blank look. Not all the time, because you're going to get a double response. Who am I talking to? If it's you, I'll give you kind of what a Christian or somebody might want to hear. To somebody else, I might give you another one. So this is a whole system built on plausible deniability, depending on who your audience is. So at one time, they could kind of think of God as the creator, but Kabbalistically, they think of the Big Bang and millions of trillions of years, and that's part of and so you can never, it's like nailing jelly to a wall, right? It's very slippery stuff you're dealing with. But fundamentally, when Rabbi Antelman says God, and you always kind of have that Judeo-Christian thing going on, you got to get rid of that. That's not what they mean. They mean a God of forces. He is as Masonic as all these people he's critiquing. Their job, according to Talmudic Kabbalah, is to bring these forces down and tikkun olam. God made a mistake in creating this, and they're going to use themselves to do it. Now, there might be Gnostic variations that he doesn't approve of, but this is a massive contradiction that he's the one, he puts himself in charge of saying, what rabbis were legit and which ones weren't. So I think it's just a lot of gobbledygook, and I think you guys are going to agree with that part of it, of what he's saying. But I sort of get that So just a little bit more background. So Sabbatai Zevi, if you've never heard this before, when he comes around and calls himself Messiah, this is a long, like every few generations in this Kabbalistic movement, they have a messianic figure. Even I heard an interview years ago with Rabbi Antelman, said he claimed to be the Messiah. And then somebody asked him, do you believe that? He said, I'm not saying he wasn't. So he even believes that Sabbatai Zevi might have been a Messiah. And so about 3/4 of world Jewry followed and believed in him. And so the next generation with the Frankists, you're going to get the creation of the Illuminati. The official story is the secret was found out and they disbanded. I never talk about the Illuminati, except if I'm comparing the international conspiracies, the protocols, then I look at all I didn't systematize these. A number of other people did. There is one cosmic conspiracy against God, man, Christ, and the church. And they're just one note of it. And there's probably interacting people, but they are working for powers and principalities. And so what those are trying to do is create an anti-reality, everything we see today through contradiction, through dialectics. And they're trying to get you into their deception at the end times. And again, I'll go back to it. Every time you see no crosses. I went into a fancy hotel last week, all menorahs, no crosses. There should be something in your mind like they're really putting it in their face. If you want a projection for next year, you're going to see more of them and fewer crosses. They're made illegal. What are you going to find? More hate speech. And so we know what's coming. And you can go with that mimetic flow into the great deception, or you can kind of understand it and resist it. And that's what I believe the saints of the apocalypse are telling us right now. So yeah, understanding the Jewish, and this is hard for people to take, okay? This is not nice language, so I'll say it on YouTube. When you understand this through the Catholic perspective, for example, I'll just put a couple books up here. The people that were warned at Vatican II, nice big book. People have warned about Jules Isaac and the agenda. It's very real that they want to subvert and take over. The Catholic Church is the crown jewel. Nobody can understand this. People can talk all day that it's all a Jesuit conspiracy. They created the Illuminati. They created the Mace. It's like, really? Okay. Anyway, and unless you've looked into the history of the Jesuits, honestly, you'll just go with that flow. Yeah, it's a Jesuit thing. So what is the JQ? Sorry for hogging it so much here, you guys. I can't help myself, but the JQ, what they are saying, what these good priests are trying to tell everybody at Vatican II is everywhere this group has gone, they've subverted people. There's no exceptions, unless maybe it was 5 people that got lost. Every culture, all through time, there is a consistent mode of operation here, and they're networked, and that's a reality. And by 1890, they had subverted most of Europe. First, the economy, then the universities, then the media. And that was 145 years ago, right? So here we are right now. We're having trouble finding a language. And this is all approved Catholic stuff. These are what the saints are trying to tell us. This matters right now. This stuff matters. So the JQ is this guy that we're talking about here, Rabbi Antelman. He does not want to talk about the JQ. The Jewish influencers that want to talk about Gaza, and very often they can't talk about the JQ. It's not about Zionism. It's not about communism. Those are just a couple arms of this hydra. The problem is what the honest Catholic saints and honest Catholic scholars have been telling us. But it's been memory hold, and it's not comfortable for people to think about. Because it's not comfortable to think about doesn't mean it's wrong or you don't need to know it. It's exactly the front piece of the mission every time that Christ went face to face with the Pharisees. And people want to pretend you don't hear it a homily, so you pretend like it didn't exist or you don't need to know it. And we're at a place right now when they're putting these menorahs up in our face. John, would you agree? It's probably time that we kind of wise up to this a little bit.
Yeah, it's, reading this book or reading any book written by a Jew is madness, because they're living in a world of madness. They're living in disorder. I have empathy for them. They need to leave that world. That world will lead you to depression, suicide. So when you're reading this guy's book, and he says that all the Illuminati and the communists, their whole goal is to destroy Judaism and Jews. That Stalin was going to practice genocide before he died, and he was going to kill all the Jews. The Illuminati were the wealthy Freemasons. Hints at that it's not the Jews behind it, and that the Sufis, the big influence of them, and they're the ones who really created the Rosicrucians, and the fact that Sabbatai Zevi converted to Islam, and they still think he's a Messiah. I mean, these people are nuts. They're nuts. So one of the big takeaways from this is that when you're reading this, there's a lot of good stuff in it, but then there's a lot of stuff that's totally contrary to Catholic teaching in history. So that law of non-contradiction, it's just like staring you in the face. He's dancing back and forth in reality in the book. And it comes down to, he even says at the end that it is their job as Orthodox Jews to coerce all Earth's inhabitants except Noahide laws. So
I
that's
mean,
why
it's unreal. And I didn't get that when I read it like 11, 12 years ago. That part I lost, and this part, it blew me away. Like, whoa.
Yeah, and then I think the other big takeaway is he says, yeah, the Jews, the bankers were behind both sides in World War II. They were behind Hitler, and that the refugee relief programs are always denied by American Jews because they didn't want Orthodox practicing Jews to flood into Israel. They wanted the atheists. And so
not many people will say that they were all they all got the memo not to accept the refugees, so they could only go to one place. And people don't like to look at that coordination underneath it, the degree of influence in all these countries. And that was a central part of and he identifies that like we said last week with Albert Pike, we will do this in World War I, we'll do this in World War II. And everything went according to plan. And a lot of people cannot get their heads around that. But when you look at this, like they were on hold down. They came into whatever it was, Cuba, and nope, at the last minute, go back. And so that was just the huge part of this. And we're living in part 3 right now. And there's a script going on. And it's funny, as you're saying, John, I hope I didn't interrupt you because I'm going to get back to you to let you finish just in case. But the important part of this is he can see, okay, World War II is arranged for these ends by these Gnostic and infiltrators into our faith, or the internal contradictions. Why do you think you're going to have when you have a contradictory faith, you're going to have internal contradictions? That's why we don't have them in Catholicism, because it's impossible. The magisterium made it impossible to have those things. But so he'll go, well, the Bolsheviks actually got funding from these Wall Street people. And so it's like, hello, who do you think they were? The funding actually came from Wall Street and these guys from Brooklyn and the Bronx. And so he can't go the level of a Father Fahey and say, who were these and why? What's the pattern all the way back to the 1st century? And we can go deeper with that too. But if you can't connect how this is an inversion of our history, our sacramentality, our hierarchy. That's literally what the anti-church is that they're making. And they're making it bit by this. Justin, hop on in here.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's a limited hangout, this book. I mean, and again, you don't know what his internal disposition is. Maybe he actually does believe the garbage that he's trying to sell. I don't know. Or maybe he knows he
thinks that there's a Platonic, like the triangle on the back of the dollar bill. It's not the Jays that did it. It's this Gnostic group, and they're following Plato, and they're trying to rebuild Plato's Republic. Yeah. And he calls out, they follow Aleister Crowley and Gold, and they do. The dark and light. They do. I mean, that is correct.
The Neoplatonism is there. It's there, but it's the thing is, it's like he acted like he's like, and Judaism won against
pure.
He's like, we beat the Greeks like 2,000 years ago, or blah blah blah. It's like, dude, come on, it's it's a limited, it's clearly a limited hangout. I mean, because you don't see this with like Christians and stuff like that like, well, so, to a limited extent you do see some Christians that apostatize and get into like all these revolutionary movements, but man, it's like with them, with the SOS, it's disproportionate. It's not even close. And it's like, dude, I mean, like this whole thing is a limited hangout. I've met people like this where they're just like, well, Orthodox Jews, they're like us, right? And it's like, have you read the Talmud?
No, they don't. They believe, all of them, whatever their thing is. Some people say bend the hand of God. Some people don't, whatever they mean by God.
Yeah.
But they all believe that from Jerusalem, a select few will rule the world. They all believe that.
Right. It's part of like their core beliefs, right? There is this J supremacy that is part of their core belief system, right? And it is part of their religion. You can't get past that. Like to get past that J supremacy, you gotta not believe in the religion anymore. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, and that's a big problem. I mean, like what these secularists that Antelman is criticizing or is doing, what they're essentially doing is tikkun olam. What all these isms are, what all these modern isms are just the logical consequence or the logical like flow of tikkun olam. Because if you're a Jew that actually believes in tikkun olam, that you got to fix the world, you got to fix God because everything's broken and the world is broken because God's broken. So you got to, you're part of this special people and only you and your special people can fix everything. Well, then, I mean, that answers everything when it comes to why all these isms are created and then, disproportionately led by, funded by like these people. Right. I mean, and it just explains everything. And he's not willing to say that. And he's just either he's got this blind spot or he's lying through his teeth. I don't know. I'm not going to, we don't, as Christians, we don't speculate on people's interior disposition, but either way, it's a limited hangout and it's, it doesn't actually explain everything that's going on like we do. Like when we talk about like things through a Catholic lens, which actually explains what's going on, the rejection of Jesus Christ, the rejection of God, and how it actually leads to all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, this expression right here, the J's for Satan, that's Rabbi Antelman saying that he created this idea. Now, I think they've been working for the dark side since the 1st century, but and what we call Gnosticism, people have traced it. Almost all of the leaders of the Gnostics in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, almost all of them were of that birth. Anybody that can there's a few exceptions actually. And I think it has to deal with just dealing with this rejection, or as the famous phrase goes, a rejection of logos will get you there. But him citing this, he's already playing part of the contradiction, a pure strain versus the satanic strain. So you already got a contradiction going on there. And the whole movement works through contradiction and creative destruction. So it's kind of perfect for that movement. And, just modern iterations of this, people will say, this is where this gets more into almost pop culture, how this influenced the Skull and Bones or the other fraternal organizations. And so that famous debate with Kerry and Bush, where they were both Skull and Bones. And the idea is there is this part of the Illuminati that has sort of a Gentile face. That's through the intermarriages, mostly in Spain, Portugal, and especially England. And so you have that face at front, and some people will call them the Continentalists, the Darwins, the Huxleys, and those kind of people that really advance the agenda through another frame. But the essential frame is, it's what we're always talking about. It's a misplaced millennium. That's why in the Catholic Church, through our lens of reality, which is historical, sacramental, and hierarchical, we understand that the church is the millennial age. The church replaced the old covenant, And when we think like that, we're not going to be subject to this. And we hold tight to that and defend that idea and don't get into some uh, crypto dual covenant thinking. They want to destroy all religions and nations and create a one world order. And I would say, that's been true since some of the, since the Venetian oligarch, kind of merged out of the Dark Ages.
Mm-hmm.
But so who ended up controlling that? Who are the people? So a lot of people, and Justin just mentioned the word limited hangout. A lot of people, by calling it anything else under the sun, Mr. Global or military industrial complex, or you're playing into that. You're not seeing how God explained the typology and what's the cost of killing Christ, of rejecting Christ as a form of power to build a new world. So who ended up controlling that? Are we going to take his? Because what would he have to say? His last book was written in 2002. Could Rabbi Antelman really look at the world right now? He wouldn't call it out as it is, because it's so obvious that the people running the world, this is their belief system. And if you're not on board with that, you're going to be marginalized within their world. And that's the final aim. And he makes some interesting connections in there. He thinks Marx wasn't the real deal. I would differ. I would say that he's from many generations of Talmudic rabbis that puts this dialectic into the world on behalf of the synagogue. So I completely reject that. He said that he does go into some interesting stuff, like the kind of controversy between him and Hess was manufactured and fake to create a dialectic, but they were always friends. And this outcome of this is you're going to get what we do argue, that the heirs of Russia are that there is no real dialectic between Zionism and communism. It's the synagogue pairing these two things off at the world level to bring in their world order. And so it's just really, it is almost kind of absurd. And it just really begins by questioning, what do you mean when you say God? And just a couple others, as long as I'm on a roll, and then I'll shut up here. He does go into how he was influenced by this book right here, The Naked Communist, to a lesser extent, Sutton, but the work that the communists were, what we always say, the Bolsheviks were really genocidal maniacs. And that's who we should really be celebrating, the death of good people over there en masse. He makes claims about which are true, that the connections between heroes, many people that are heroes, and that they were working for these, I don't know if you'd call them Gnostic Jews, I guess he would call them, not the real Jews, but the Gnostic Jews. And so Martin Luther King, he's making a lot of, but yeah, at the end of the day, he is down with this. Oh, by the way, yeah, he's saying the people behind the Council of Foreign Relations, we would call it the World Economic Forum. They're pushed by corporations, but he doesn't, who in the interconnected directories of these corporations, when you get to a handful of people that also are in charge of the central bank system of the world, who are these handful of people? What would you call them? Gnostic? And he's saying, and this is where it's very provocative. Today, when we talk about, flag events on October, and he says they're behind it. This group is behind ISIS and Hamas and these kind of groups, PLO, they're behind it, controlling the negotiations. So, he really puts a lot of ideas way out there. And finally, he even questions this narrative. I won't say it out loud, but he's saying they were even out there controlling this narrative. So you do not get, and this is why he's a hot potato with other people inside the group to talk about, because he's going places where nobody did. But we will visit that topic in 2 weeks and just look. My case, as I told the guys, I officially, to all of you, believe it's true, the official story, because it's illegal to question it, so it must be. But we're going to do it anyway. Why? Because, why do you watch the nightly news? Why do you go to school? Because you want to learn about the world. So, and I do agree, it's good to learn the official story before you kind of question it. but I believe a part of the unveiling through the perspective of God, the reason the saints are speaking to us is it's a window to this illumination of our consciousness through Christ, that we can see this and not be deceived. If we have the, if we don't want to go with the flow and roll our eyes and, oh, Illuminati, and so the way he did it today by breaking down in his sources were pretty dang good, especially in volume 2 for a lot of this stuff. The question we come up with is, what do you mean when you say God? When you put this thing next to our nativity scene, this trident spear next to what do you mean that we're part of the same group? Because we know what you say behind closed doors, and people just need to sort of step back from that. And of course, we've been saying that forever. John Carter, I know you got more ideas. We'll start kind of slowly wrapping it up with the YouTube group, because I think we'll get over to we'll get more jagged over there on the other side on locals. But what are you thinking right now, John?
Well, I'm thinking a lot. I have this book here, Anthony Sutton's America's Secret Establishment. And then I have Jim Marrs' Population Control. And if you read these books, the common theme is they always leave out the enmity from different angles, and they're connected to modern day today, COVID, etc., with the solution. Technocracy now. Patrick Wood, he was a partner with Anthony Sutton. So this deception runs deep. It's so profound. Cathedrals were replaced with courthouses in America, in Protestant America. Crucifixes were always countered across the street with an obelisk, with the famous Freemason, at least in Texas. Everywhere you go, every Catholic church across the street is an obelisk, and in Brazil too. Then you had the Christmas angel on top of the tree and became a star. And stars in every plaza, every courthouse lawn in Texas, it's a star. So which God are you worshiping? And then the nativity scene is now replaced with menorah, which to me is the final. It's the battle for space, and it's the final insult. And it means that they've taken control. They're in control, and it goes to this book where the atheistic Israelis, as he mentions in his book, will probably be destroyed. And in their place will be the remaining Jews, the ones who are mad at the atheistic Jews because they brought in abortion. They changed fetal murder to the right to choice. This is from his book. They changed sexual perversion to sexual preference. They changed a felon for assisted suicide to a right to determine one's future. And they changed sexual restraint to be an expression of human dignity. Actually, anachronism. It's all there. So they're going to come in and save the day, the white horse, to get rid of the bad Jews as they've blown off the map, and then demand the Noahide laws to come in. And so there's a process you can see. It's stacked up. It's like you're sitting in a corral and you've just sorted cows. Cows are going to the slaughter plant, and cows are going back out in the pasture. And they can see the cows are going to the slaughter plant over there in Israel right now. And they will be used as a as similar to what happened in the 1940s, the narrative. To bring in the final stage of.
It's part of the script.
Part of the script. Yeah, it's all scripted. Yeah. So I the only thing about the book, one thing that stuck out is he said about Stalin was planning to eliminate all of Soviet Jewry, and talking about an article that was written in 1953 in Pravda entitled "Foul Spies and Murderers in the Guise of Professors of Medicine." Quote, "Killer doctors who were recruited into American intelligence through the International Jewish Organization Joint were killing their patients." Now, just 2020, it's madness. It's madness. So the book is madness, in my opinion. It's important to read because you realize that that truth is a man, and his name is Jesus Christ. If you deny him, you are out of the world's order and out of logic. You're into illogic, and you will behave as such. And you can't trust people like that because they don't even know they're lying. I don't think they can even help it.
Right. Yeah. And he'd even say that they will perform blood libel, highlight it in order to generate anti-Semitism. In other words, they'll sacrifice their own. But he said that that is something that they do.
Yeah.
He didn't try to hide it.
Yeah.
You didn't read that. Yeah. So, okay, we're going to kind of really get a little more personal about it over on Locals, and I'll let you wrap it up, Justin.
Well, I mean, like, I think the big thing here, takeaway here is like, just like what I'm talking about on my channel is the theology here. And like, and this is, I think, probably what you probably talk about in your upcoming book, which everybody should order, is that there is a theological implication here, and there is a practical, like, consequence here, is that where this is headed for us, and the saints all talk about, the church fathers talk about this, is in the end, towards the end times, there will be a lot of Judaizing of the Christians, and there will be a lot of work to make Christians basically try to syncretize themselves with the Jewish religion, which denies Christ, right? And that's not even controversial. They don't believe Jesus Christ is the Messiah. And what will happen is it will set us Christians up, and hopefully you're not one of them if you're watching this, but it will set Christians up to actually receive the Antichrist better, right? Because they will see, the Antichrist will be of the tribe of Dan. He will be of that tribe, right? And he will reign at the third temple once it's built in Jerusalem. And he will say he is God. He will claim to be the Messiah and God, and the people that are being shaped by these ideologies, being shaped by this rhetoric that this tribe is selling, will shape Christians to believe that too. So people that are Zionists and stuff will be the ones that fall for the Antichrist deception. So it's very important that you want, and the church fathers talk about that. They're saying in the end times, the Judaizing will hit a new level of craziness, and basically people that call themselves Christians are not really going to be, because they're going to be essentially Jewish, right? So yeah, I think that's the main thing to take away from this, is the theological and practical implications.
They joined the synagogue.
Right,
We're really
right.
talking about them more than anything.
Yeah,
they're people. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's interesting, just as a closing thought right now, there is being not formed, being implemented, put in action, a world force out of, an extension of the IDF to police the world on behalf of anything that's not unpopular with these unelected people. And in charge, at least he claims to be in charge, is Rabbi Shmuley. Now, it's kind of, could you find a more unpopular guy? So there's got to be some deeper reason to put, like, it's kind of in your face, right? Most of the people in the synagogue don't even like the guy. So you're going to put that guy, Mr. Buttplug, in charge of an international force to regulate speech with soldiers on the ground. And they're here, right? That's part of, like when you saw it in the Sydney Opera House, that's what they're saying, like, because they're on the ground over there. So when you want to take these insane events at face value, you will be slowly sucked into these things. So sometimes you think, well, I don't want to be one of those crazy conspiracy. That's why we do it through the mind of the church. And again, our links are on there for the Locals, but there's so many people that, for the most part, just bring this back to living out our Catholic faith in a way that's historically understood. I get so much out of our community. And I want to thank all of you people in the community. We had a great end of 2025 day. And I want to thank you, John and Justin. I really enjoy our time each Friday. And it's nice to be able to pop up on YouTube now and again and share what we do with all of you. Thank you all for being with us. We got a couple exciting weeks lined up on YouTube and down below. So I hope everybody's doing well, and thank you for joining us.